She was just a waitress, invisible to the privileged elite she served. One cruel complaint, one false accusation, and Leo Vance was thrown out onto the street, her world collapsing. She clutched the only thing she had left, a cheap, tarnished pendant from her mother. But as she stumbled out of the alley, a billionaire stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at the metal in her hand, his face pale with shock. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was looking at the ghost of a 2-decade-old secret, and the one person who could destroy his entire family. The clinking of silverware on porcelain was the soundtrack to Leo Vance's life, a monotonous rhythm that barely managed to drown out the ache in her feet. Le Ciel, a restaurant that boasted a 3-month waiting list and views that spanned the city skyline, was not a place for kindness. It was a glittering stage for the wealthy, and Leo was just part of the scenery, expected to be silent, efficient, and invisible. Tonight, the air was particularly thick with tension. A major food critic was rumored to be dining anonymously, and the manager, Marcus Henderson, was prowling the floor like a nervous wolf. Leo balanced a heavy tray, laden with Le Ciel's signature seared scallops, her arm burning. "Table 7, Henderson hissed as she passed, his eyes flicking to her apron. "And tuck in that stray hair, Vance. This isn't a diner." Leo resisted the urge to sigh, tucking the errant strand of brown hair back into her tight bun. Table 7 was her nightmare. Mrs. Beatrice Van Dorn, a woman whose diamonds were as sharp as her tongue, had been complaining all evening. The water was too cold. The bread was too warm. The lighting was giving her a migraine. As Leo approached, Mrs. Van Dorn was holding court with her 2 bored-looking companions, gesturing wildly with a hand weighed down by a sapphire the size of a robin's egg. "And I told the board," Mrs. Van Dorn declared, "that if they think I am funding mediocrity, they are sorely—" It happened in a fraction of a second. Leo, moving gracefully to place the scallops, was suddenly blocked. Mrs. Van Dorn's pointed heel had shot out from under the table, directly into Leo's path. Leo stumbled, the heavy tray tilting precariously. She managed to save the scallops, but the small side dish of lemon butter sauce, heated to perfection, flew from the tray. It splashed directly onto the sleeve of Mrs. Van Dorn's pristine, cream-colored Chanel jacket. A piercing shriek echoed through the hushed dining room. All conversation stopped. "You clumsy idiot!" Mrs. Van Dorn leaped to her feet, shaking her arm as if Leo had doused her in acid. "Look what you've done! This is couture! This is ruined!" "Mrs. Van Dorn, I am so dreadfully sorry," Leo stammered, grabbing a clean napkin and dabbing futilely at the oily stain. "It was an accident, an accident. You think I believe that?" Mrs. Van Dorn's voice dripped with venom. "You probably did it on purpose. You service-class people are all the same, dripping with jealousy. You couldn't afford a single button on this jacket." "Ma'am, I assure you—" "Henderson!" the woman bellowed. "Get over here!" Marcus Henderson materialized, his face a mask of panicked obsequiousness. "Mrs. Van Dorn, is there a problem?" "A problem? This incompetent girl has destroyed my jacket. I want her fired. Now. In front of me." Leo's blood ran cold. "Mr. Henderson, She put her foot out. I tripped." Henderson's eyes darted between the fuming socialite and the terrified waitress. Mrs. Van Dorn was a major investor in the restaurant group. Leo was replaceable. The choice was instantaneous. "Leo, that is a despicable accusation to make against a guest," Henderson snapped. "You have been careless and disrespectful. Apologize to Mrs. Van Dorn immediately." "I did apologize for the spill," Leo said, her voice shaking but firm. "But I will not apologize for being tripped." Mrs. Van Dorn let out a gasp of theatrical offense. "You see? The audacity. Fire her, or I will make it my personal mission to see Le Ciel shuttered by morning." I will call my husband. I will call the post." Henderson's face turned purple. "Vance, you're done. Get your things. You're fired." Leo stared at him, the buzzing of the restaurant fading to a dull roar. Fired. Just like that. Rent was due on Friday. Her younger sister's community college tuition payment was late. "But Mr. Henderson, now," he roared. "Get out of my sight before I call security." The walk to the staff locker room felt like a mile. The other servers avoided her gaze, some with pity, most with relief that it wasn't them. She ripped off the apron, the Le Ciel logo seeming to mock her. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely work the combination on her locker. Tears of frustration and humiliation burned her eyes. She reached into the locker and pulled out her thin jacket, her bus pass, and a small, tarnished silver chain. On the end of the chain was a pendant. It was her only link to her mother, who had died when Leo was just a child. It was shaped like a phoenix, its wings spread wide, with a tiny, dull ruby for an eye. It was probably worthless, but it was all she had. She fumbled to put it on, needing the familiar cold weight against her skin. The clasp was broken. She just clenched it in her fist, the metal biting into her palm. She didn't take the main elevator. She couldn't bear to walk back through the restaurant. Instead, she pushed through the double doors to the service staircase and stumbled down into the cold, damp alleyway used for garbage and deliveries. She leaned against the brick wall, the tears finally coming, hot and fast. She was fired. She was broke. She was alone. She opened her hand and looked at the pendant, a silent plea for strength. It was then that she heard the sound of an engine idling. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce was parked at the end of the alley near the VIP exit. A chauffeur was holding the door open. Leo wiped her eyes, trying to make herself smaller, invisible again. She just had to get past the car to the street. As she hurried past, the passenger door opened. A man, tall and impossibly sharp in a tailored dark suit, was stepping out, barking into his phone. "I don't care what the board says, Sebastian," he snapped. "Liquidate the assets. The deal is dead." Leo kept her head down, scurrying by. But in her haste and her tears, she caught her foot on an uneven paving stone. She gasped, lurching forward, and collided squarely with the man's chest. "Watch where you're going," he snarled, dropping his phone. "I'm so sorry, sir, Leo bent to retrieve the phone, her hand still clutching the silver pendant. The man, Damian Blackwood, one of the wealthiest and most reclusive billionaires in the country, looked down, his eyes like chips of ice, ready to unleash a torrent of fury. He saw her hand reaching for the phone. He saw the dirty fingernails, the cheap jacket, and he saw the glint of silver. His breath hitched. The entire world seemed to stop. He didn't grab his phone. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was like steel. "Where?" he whispered, his voice shaking with an intensity that terrified her. "Did you get that?" Leo froze, staring at the sudden, horrifying pallor of his face. He wasn't just angry, he was in shock. He was looking at her mother's pendant, as if he had just seen a ghost. Leo tried to yank her arm away, her heart hammering against her ribs. First, she was fired and humiliated. Now, she was being accosted in an alley by a man who looked like he could buy the entire city block. "Let go of me!" she cried, panic rising in her throat. "The pendant!" Damian Blackwood repeated, his voice raw. He ignored her struggles, his gaze locked on the silver phoenix in her palm. His knuckles were white. "Give it to me." "No, it's mine. It was my mother's." The chauffeur, a large man named Arthur, had rounded the car. "Sir, is there a problem?" Damian didn't even look at him. He was staring at Leo's face now, searching it, his eyes wild. "Your mother, what was her name?" That's none of your business. Let me go, or I'll scream." "Scream," Damien said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, desperate whisper. "Scream, and I'll have the police here in 30 seconds. But you will not leave until you tell me about that necklace." Leo realized he wasn't going to hurt her. He was desperate. She stopped struggling, breathing heavily. The alley light caught the silver in her hand. "It's just a cheap piece of jewelry," she said, her voice trembling. "It's all I have left of her." "It's not cheap," Damien said, his voice cracking. He finally released her wrist, but only to reach into his own jacket. He bypassed his wallet and pulled a chain from under his shirt. Hanging from it was a pendant. It was not identical, but it was a clear set. Hers was a phoenix rising from flames. His was a wolf, mid-howl. Both were crafted from the same antiqued silver, and the wolf's eye was a single, tiny, perfect sapphire. "This," he said, holding his wolf pendant, "is the crest of the Blackwood family. It was made by Cartier in 1920. There are only two. This one was for the heir." He then pointed a shaking finger at the phoenix in her hand. "And that one," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "was for the spare. It was given to my sister, Arabella, on her 5th birthday. A sister who was lost, presumed drowned, in a boating accident off the coast of Maine 22 years ago. Her body was never found. Neither was the pendant." Leo's mind reeled. She couldn't process the words. Cartier. Billionaire. Sister. I don't understand," Leo whispered. "My mother's name was Amelia. Amelia Vance. She died of pneumonia when I was 16. She was a housekeeper. She told me this was a trinket she bought at a flea market." Damien stared at her, the cogs turning in his brilliant, ruthless mind. "Amelia Vance. And your name?" "Leo. Leo Vance. Did she ever talk about her childhood? Before you? Did she have any family?" "No," Leo said, shaking her head. "She always said she was an orphan, that her life started when she had me. But she had nightmares about water. She hated the water. She would never even go to the beach." Damien's face, which had been a mask of stone in the restaurant, was now completely undone. He looked haunted. "Arthur," he barked at his chauffeur, not taking his eyes off Leo. "Cancel my meeting with the Tokyo investors. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Sir, just do it and get in the car." "Sir, I'm not going anywhere with you," Leo said, taking a step back. "Yes, you are," Damien said. "It wasn't a request. You were just fired, weren't you? From Le Ciel. I saw the commotion." Leo flushed. "How did you—" "I own the building they lease from. I was dining with my father tonight. That woman, Beatrice Van Dorn. She's a piece of work. Did she trip you?" Leo gapfled. "Yes." She stuck her foot out. "And Mr. Henderson fired you to appease her. I know how it works," Damien said impatiently. "You have no job, you have no money, and you are holding the single most important object I have ever seen. You think I am letting you walk away? You think I believe this is a coincidence?" He took a step closer, his eyes pleading now. "Please, I am not trying to scare you. I have been looking for that pendant for my entire adult life. If your mother wasn't my sister, how did she get it? Who was she?" Leo looked down at the phoenix. Her whole life, it had been a symbol of her poverty, her past. Now this powerful man was telling her it was a key. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice small. "I want the truth. I want you to come with me to the Blackwood estate. I want to talk to my father. And I want," he said, his voice hardening again, "to run a DNA test." Leo's head spun. The Blackwood estate. DNA test. This was the stuff of movies, not her life. "I can't," she said weakly. I have my sister, Clara. I need to find a new job. I can't just—" "Clara," Damien repeated, already pulling out his new phone, which Arthur had retrieved. "I will have my assistant send a care package to your apartment. I will wire $50,000 to your bank account right now. Consider it a retainer for your time." $50,000? Leo choked. That was more than she made in a year. "A pittance," Damien said, "if you are who I think you are. Or more accurately, if your mother was who I think she was." He gestured to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was plush cream leather and polished wood, glowing warmly. "Leo Vance," Damien Blackwood said, "I believe you are my niece. And I believe my stepmother, Eleanor, has been lying to my father for 22 years. Your life, as you know it, is over. The question is, are you brave enough to find out what comes next?" Leo looked at the car. She looked back at the grimy alley, the stench of garbage, the flashing Le Ciel sign that represented her humiliation. She had nothing left to lose. Clutching the Phoenix pendant tightly, Leo Vance got in the car. The drive to the Blackwood estate was silent and surreal. Leo sank into the leather, the car gliding through the city streets with a ghostly quietness. Damien sat opposite her, not on his phone, not looking out the window, but staring at her. It was an unnerving, analytical gaze, as if he were trying to superimpose another face onto hers. "My sister, Arabella," he said, breaking the silence as they passed the city limits and entered a stretch of private, tree-lined roads. "She had your eyes, my mother's eyes, brown but with flecks of gold." Leo instinctively touched her face. She had always thought her eyes were just brown. "And she was stubborn," Damien continued, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "She once hid from our nanny for 6 hours in a dumbwaiter because she didn't want to practice piano. My mother, Amelia, she was stubborn," Leo whispered, remembering. "She worked 2 jobs, even when she was sick. She refused all help. She always said, 'We Vances are made of steel, Leo. We don't bend.'" "Vance, that's the part I don't understand," Damien murmured. "Where did she get that name?" Before Leo could answer, the car slowed. Massive, wrought-iron gates, emblazoned with the same wolf crest from Damien's necklace, swung open. They proceeded up a long, winding drive, passing manicured lawns that looked more like golf courses. The estate wasn't a house, it was a palace, a sprawling stone monstrosity of towers, gables, and ivy, lit against the night sky like a fortress. Arthur parked the car, and Damien led Leo inside. The entrance hall was cavernous, with a marble floor and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in Versailles. "Damien, is that you? I thought you were in Tokyo." A woman descended the grand staircase. She was in her late 50s, impossibly elegant in a silk dressing gown, her silver blonde hair in a perfect coif. Her beauty was cold, precise, and intimidating. "Eleanor," Damien said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "The trip was postponed. Where is my father?" Eleanor, the stepmother, glided to a halt at the bottom of the stairs. Her eyes swept over Leo, taking in the cheap jacket, the worn-out sneakers, and the tear-streaked face. It was a look of such profound disdain that Leo wanted to shrink. "In the conservatory, I believe." "He's not feeling well," Eleanor said, dismissing Leo. "Who is this?" "Don't tell me you're bringing the staff's children through the front door. This isn't a charity." "This," Damien said, his voice dangerously low, "is Leo Vance. She is the daughter of a woman named Amelia Vance." Eleanor's polished smile didn't waver, but her eyes, a pale, icy blue, sharpened. How nice for her. "And she is here because—" Damien took Leo's hand and raised it, opening her fist to show the phoenix pendant still clutched inside. "She's here because of this." For a single, fleeting second, the mask dropped. Eleanor's face went white. It wasn't shock, like Damien's. It was fear. Pure, undiluted terror. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a light, tinkling laugh. "Oh, Damien," she said, touching her throat. "Must you be so dramatic? A trinket? You're still obsessed with that unfortunate past. How many girls have you found who claimed to have a connection to poor Arabella?" "None," Damien said. "None of them had the crest." "The crest?" Eleanor scoffed. "It's a blurry photograph in a 20-year-old police file. Anyone could make a replica. This girl is clearly a grifter, a very unpolished one at that." "We'll see," Damien said. "Father," he called, striding toward a set of glass doors. "Damien, don't upset him," Eleanor snapped, her composure cracking. "His heart—" But Damien was already through the doors. The conservatory was a jungle of exotic plants. In the center, a frail old man sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over his knees, staring at the dark glass. This was Arthur Blackwood, the patriarch, the man who had built the empire. "Father," Damien said, his voice softer. "Damien." Arthur Blackwood turned, his eyes cloudy. "You're back. Father, I've found someone. I need you to look. Really look." Damien gently guided Leo forward. The old man squinted at her. Leo felt a strange pull. She looked at his face, the strong brow, the shape of his jaw, and saw for the first time a flicker of her own reflection. She's very pretty, son," Arthur murmured. "But who—" "Show him," Damien urged Leo. Leo stepped forward and held out the pendant. Arthur Blackwood's hand, thin and papery, shot out and gripped her wrist. His eyes cleared, focusing with a sudden, startling intensity on the phoenix. "My little bird," he whispered, tears welling. "Bella, my Bella bird." "You came back." "No, Father," Damien said gently. "This isn't Arabella. This is Leo. She says this was her mother's." "It's a lie." Eleanor's voice was shrill as she swept into the room. "Damien, you're torturing him." "Arthur, darling, it's a fake, a forgery. This girl is trying to steal our money." "It's not a fake," Arthur whispered, his fingers tracing the outline of the phoenix. "Look, the wing, the chip." He pointed to a minuscule flaw in the silver, barely visible. "I chipped it when I was polishing it for her birthday. I always regretted it." He looked up at Leo, his eyes full of a desperate hope. "Who was your mother, child?" "Her name was Amelia Vance," Leo said, her voice shaking. She was found by a fisherman on the coast of Maine when she was just a little girl. She had no memory, just the necklace. She had amnesia. The fisherman and his wife, the Vances, they raised her. She never knew who she was." The puzzle pieces slammed into place with devastating force. Arabella Blackwood hadn't drowned. She had survived, washed ashore, and, suffering from trauma and amnesia, had been raised as Amelia Vance. She had lived a life of poverty, a shadow of the world she was born into, and had died never knowing the truth. "My daughter," Arthur wept, clutching Leo's hand. "She lived. And you." "She is my niece," Damien said, his voice thick with a mixture of triumph and grief. "She is a liar," Eleanor shrieked. "This is a performance. She's a con artist. I want a DNA test. I demand it." "Good," Damien said, his eyes turning to ice as he looked at his stepmother. "Because I've already ordered one. My personal physician will be here in 10 minutes. He turned back to Leo and Arthur, who was still clutching her hand as if she were a lifeline. "But a test is just a formality," Damien said, staring holes into Eleanor. We have the pendant, we have the story, and we have her face. He looked at Leo, then at Arthur, then back. She has my mother's eyes, and she has the Blackwood chin. Welcome home, Leo. Eleanor Blackwood stood by the door, her face a mask of pure hatred. The game had just changed, and she was no longer in control. The next 48 hours were a blur for Leo. She was given a suite of rooms larger than her entire apartment, filled with clothes in her size that appeared as if by magic. She met Damien's physician, a discreet man who took a cheek swab from her and a frail Arthur, and promised results in 2 days. Damien, however, was not content to wait. The DNA test is for the lawyers, he told Leo over breakfast in a sun-drenched morning room. Leo was picking at a croissant, feeling entirely out of place. I already know the truth. What I want to know is what Eleanor knows. She hates me, Leo said simply, remembering the look of venom in the stepmother's eyes. She's terrified of you, Damien corrected. You are the legitimate granddaughter of Arthur Blackwood. You are the child of his first, favorite daughter. You represent a threat to her position, and more importantly, to the inheritance of her own son, Sebastian. She has a son. From a previous marriage. Sebastian Reed, a snake who runs our London office. Eleanor has been plotting to have him named CEO of Blackwood Industries for a decade, everaging my father's poor health. Your arrival complicates things. Damien pushed a laptop across the table. Which is why I looked into your accidental firing. He pressed play. It was CCTV footage from Le Ciel, from an angle Leo had never seen. It showed her, tray in hand, approaching table 7, and it clearly, unequivocally, showed Beatrice Van Dorn's foot sliding out, catching Leo's ankle. Leo gasped. I knew it. It gets better, Damien said, his voice hard. He opened another file. It was a trading statement. Mrs. Van Dorn bought 50,000 shares of a shell corporation called BioNexus 3 days ago. That company's stock is worthless. It's a pump and dump scheme. I don't understand, Leo said. The tip to buy that stock, Damien explained, came from an untraceable burner phone, a phone which I traced to a purchase made by Eleanor's personal assistant. Leo's blood ran cold. You think Eleanor paid Mrs. Van Dorn to trip me? But how did she even know who I was? I was just a waitress. Ah, Damien said, his expression darkening. That's the part that's been keeping me awake. I did a deep dive on you, Leo. Not just your job. Everything. He opened a final file. It was a PDF application. Leo recognized it immediately. My scholarship application. You applied to the Blackwood Foundation for a grant to help your sister Clara with her college tuition 3 weeks ago. I was rejected, Leo said, remembering the curt email. The Blackwood Foundation is run by one person, Damien said, the chairwoman, Eleanor. The full, horrifying picture slotted into place. Eleanor had received Leo's application. She had seen the name Leo Vance, daughter of Amelia Vance. She must have seen Leo's address, her place of employment. She had seen a potential threat, but she couldn't just make her disappear, not in this day and age. So, she did the next best thing. She set out to ruin her. She wanted me humiliated, Leo whispered. She wanted me fired and broke so I would be, what? Too busy surviving to ever look into my past? Too ashamed to ever approach the Blackwoods? Precisely, Damien said. A classic Eleanor move. Discredit the target. Make them invisible. She arranged for her friend, Mrs. Van Dorn, to get you fired in the most public, disgraceful way possible, all in exchange for a hot stock tip that was actually poison. Leo felt sick. This woman, these people, They're monsters. Yes, Damien said. And now, we're going to trap them. How? Eleanor thinks the DNA test is her only problem. She's probably trying to intercept the results right now. But she's sloppy. She thinks this is still her house, her game. Damien leaned in. Tonight is the annual Blackwood Charity Gala, our biggest event of the year. Eleanor has been planning it for months. She's invited all her friends, including, of course, Mrs. Van Dorn. You want me to go to a gala? Leo balked. I can't. I don't know how to be like them. You don't have to be like them, Damien said, his eyes glinting. You just have to be my father's granddaughter. You will be my guest of honor. We are going to announce the DNA results publicly. But what about Eleanor? She'll just deny it. Oh, she'll deny it, Damien agreed. And that's when I'll play the CCTV footage of Mrs. Van Dorn tripping you, and the bank records. Damien smiled, but it was a cold, predatory expression. Eleanor thought she was just getting a waitress fired. She didn't realize she was declaring war on a Blackwood. You will wear the Phoenix pendant. You will stand tall. And you will watch as the world she built burns to the ground. Leo, who just 2 days ago was worried about paying rent, nodded slowly. The fear was still there, but something else was growing, a cold, hard anger. She did this, Leo said, her voice finding a new steel. She knew who I was, and she left me to struggle. She let my mother die in poverty. Yes, I'll do it, Leo said. I'll go to the gala. But we're not just exposing a stock tip. Damien raised an eyebrow. I want her to admit what she did. To me. To my mother. That, my dear niece, Damien said, may be more difficult. Eleanor is a liar to her core. Then we'll just have to make it impossible for her to lie. The grand ballroom of the Blackwood estate was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and glittering jewels. Leo stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand on Damien's arm, feeling like an imposter. A team of stylists had descended on her, transforming the tired waitress into a vision. She was wearing a deep emerald green gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Her hair was swept up, and her makeup was subtle but striking, and resting on her collarbone, polished and gleaming against her skin, was the silver phoenix. I feel like I'm in a costume, she whispered to Damien. Good. It's armor, he replied. And everyone here is wearing some. Look. He nodded toward the center of the room. Eleanor was holding court, laughing lightly, a vision in diamond white. Standing right next to her, sipping champagne, was Beatrice Van Dorn. They're sticking together, Leo noted, like criminals. Exactly. Now, let's make our entrance. As they descended the staircase, the music seemed to quiet. A ripple of whispers followed them. Leo was an unknown face, and she was on Damien Blackwood's arm. Eleanor saw them. Her smile faltered, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. She saw Leo, poised and beautiful. She saw the phoenix. Damien, darling, Eleanor purred, gliding over, Mrs. Van Dorn in her wake. You're late, and you brought a friend. This is Leo Vance, Damien said, his voice carrying in the lull. My niece. The music stopped completely. A collective gasp went through the room. Niece? Mrs. Van Dorn scoffed, her eyes bulging. Don't be ridiculous. This is the girl from the restaurant, the clumsy waitress. The one you tripped, Beatrice, Damien said, his voice dangerously soft. Mrs. Van Dorn turned crimson. I did no such thing. How dare you? Oh, but you did, Damien said. He snapped his fingers. 2 massive screens on either side of the ballroom, which had been displaying images of the charity, flickered to life. And there it was, for 200 of the city's most powerful people to see. The Le Ciel CCTV footage. Beatrice Van Dorn's foot extending, Leo falling, the spat. Mrs. Van Dorn let out a small, strangled sound. "And I wonder why you did it," Damien mused, as if thinking aloud. "Perhaps in exchange for a tip on a certain biomedical company. BioNexus, was it? A company whose stock, I'm afraid, is now worthless. The SEC is investigating. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you." Mrs. Van Dorn dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble. She turned and fled the ballroom, a wave of humiliation following her. The room was silent. All eyes were on Eleanor, who looked as if she'd been carved from ice. "Damien," she hissed, "this is grotesque. You're airing our dirty laundry in public." "This isn't our laundry, Eleanor. It's yours," Damien said. "You found Leo's scholarship application. You knew who she was. You tried to destroy her before she ever reached us." "That's a lie," Eleanor cried. "You have no proof." "Actually," Damien said, "the DNA results came in this afternoon." He pulled a paper from his jacket. "Welcome to the family, Leo. It's a 99.999% match. You are Arthur Blackwood's granddaughter." A murmur of shock rolled through the crowd. "Arthur!" Eleanor spun, looking for her husband. "My father isn't here, Eleanor," Damien said. "He's in his study, with his lawyers. They are very interested in your financial records, especially the ones from 22 years ago." The colour drained from Eleanor's face. This was the final blow. What are you talking about?" she whispered. "The boat," Damien said. "The accident. It was just you and my 5-year-old sister on that boat. The official report said a rogue wave swept her overboard." "It did. It was a tragedy," Eleanor insisted, her eyes darting to the exits. "But the weather reports from that day," Damien continued, "show the sea was calm, like glass, and the boat's log. It was wiped. But the strangest thing I found," he said, stepping closer, "was a payment. A very large, untraceable cash withdrawal from your personal account just 2 days before, and a transfer to a Dr. Smith in South America a week later." Leo suddenly understood. Amnesia. My mother's amnesia. It wasn't from hitting her head on a rock. "No," Damien said, his voice filled with a cold fury Leo had never heard. Dr. Smith was a disgraced neurologist specializing in memory erasure, electroconvulsive therapy, experimental drugs. He was a monster. The entire ballroom was frozen, witnessing the unraveling. "You didn't just try to kill her," Damien choked out, his own pain evident. "When she survived, you found her. You erased her. You erased Arabella Blackwood. You paid a fisherman's family, the Vances, to find a nameless child, and then you disappeared." "No," Eleanor whimpered. "It's not true. You destroyed her life," Leo shouted, the tears she had held back finally breaking free. "She died. She died in a tiny, rented room, coughing her lungs out, never knowing who she was. She never knew she had a father, a brother. You stole everything from her, from me. She was a child," Damien roared. "My sister!" "She was a threat," Eleanor finally shrieked, her mask of sophistication shattering into a million pieces. The raw, ugly greed was finally exposed. "I was a nurse," she ranted, her eyes wild. "I took care of Arthur after his first wife died. I earned this life, and that little brat, she was always in the way. She was his favorite. Even after I gave him a son." "A son?" Damien interrupted, confused. "Sebastian is from your first marriage." "You fool," Eleanor laughed, a horrible broken sound. "Sebastian is Arthur's son. I passed him off as my first husband's to secure my own position, in case Arthur's precious Arabella inherited everything. I've spent my entire life protecting my son. And I won't let you. She pointed a shaking finger at Leo. Or you, she pointed at Damien. Take it away from him. The final, most twisted secret of all was out. The ballroom was silent, witnessing a confession. I see, Damien said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He nodded to the plain-clothed security guards he'd stationed by the door. Eleanor Blackwood, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Arabella Blackwood 22 years ago. As the guards moved in, Eleanor didn't fight. She just stared at Leo, her eyes two burning coals of hatred. You may have the name, she spat as they grabbed her arms, but you'll always be the waitress. You'll never be one of us. No, Leo said, stepping forward, her voice clear and strong. She reached up and touched the phoenix pendant. I'm not one of you. I'm one of us. I am a Vance, and I am a Blackwood. And we are made of steel. We don't bend. Eleanor was dragged from the ballroom, her screams echoing on the marble. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The Blackwood Charity Gala was the scandal of the decade. Eleanor Blackwood was charged, her case a media sensation. The evidence, from the 22-year-old financial records to Damien's testimony, was overwhelming. Sebastian Reed, implicated as a co-conspirator in his mother's more recent financial crimes, was fired and fled the country. Beatrice Van Dorn was facing charges from the SEC, and Luciel was in free fall. The association with the scandal and the public playing of the CCTV footage was toxic. Their elite clientele vanished overnight. Reservations were cancelled. The restaurant, once the height of exclusivity, was empty. A week after the gala, Leo sat with Damien in the back of the Rolls-Royce, parked across the street from the restaurant. A Felice sign was already being prepared. It's finished, Leo said quietly. Good, Damien replied. It was a rotten place, built on the egos of people like Henderson and Van Dorn. But the staff, Leo said, thinking of the other waiters, the cooks, the bus boys. They're out of a job, just like I was. It's not their fault. Damien looked at her. In the past week, the change in her had been remarkable. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely confidence. She was dressing differently, holding her head high. She was, in every sense, a Blackwood. What do you propose? He asked. Leo took a deep breath. I want to buy it. Damien blinked. The restaurant? The lease, she clarified. The brand. Everything. You told me my mother's trust fund, the one Eleanor hid, has been sitting in an account, untouched for 22 years. You said it was mine. It is, Damien confirmed. It's a considerable fortune. I want to use it. I want to buy Le Ciel and fix it. I want to reopen it as something better. A place that treats its staff with respect. A place that gives back. Damien smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. My father would love that. My mother would have loved that. He nodded. Make the call. 2 days later, Leo Vance walked back through the front doors of Le Ciel. The restaurant was closed, the tables draped in white sheets. The remaining staff were gathered in the dining room, being given their final paychecks by a stressed-out Marcus Henderson. And that's all, folks, Henderson was saying, avoiding eye contact. The bank has seized the assets. We're done. Not quite, Marcus. Leo's voice echoed in the silent room. Henderson spun around. Leo, what are you doing here? I told you. He stopped. This was not the Leo he had fired. This woman was wearing a sharp, dark blue suit, her hair in a sleek ponytail. She looked powerful. I'm here, Leo said, walking calmly to the front of the room, as the new owner of Le Ciel. Henderson's jaw dropped. The staff gasped. You... What? That's impossible. Is it? Leo said. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, Blackwood Industries, on my behalf, has acquired all assets and liabilities of this restaurant, which means," she turned to the assembled staff, "that none of you are fired. Your jobs are safe. Your back pay will be wired by noon, and you are all getting a 20% raise." A wave of stunned, joyful murmurs erupted. "Now," Leo said, turning her icy gaze back to Henderson. "All of you, except one." Henderson began to sweat. "Now, Leo. Miss Vance, I was just following orders. Mrs. Van Dorn, she's a very important woman. She's a criminal," Leo said flatly. "And you're a coward. You threw me to the wolves to save your own skin. You humiliated me. You stood by and let an innocent person be trampled because she was poor and the abuser was rich. Please," he whimpered. "I have a family." "So do I," Leo said. "And so did every person you've bullied in this restaurant for the last 10 years. You have 1 hour to clear out your office. Security will escort you." Henderson, defeated, slumped and walked away. Not even making eye contact, Leo turned back to the staff. "My name is Leo Vance Blackwood. Things are going to be different around here. We are closing for 1 month for renovations. We will reopen not as Le Ciel, but as Arabella's. It will be a place of warmth and respect. We will have a profit-sharing program. We will have fair wages and health care. And we," she said, a smile finally breaking on her face, "are going to be the best restaurant in this city." A loud, spontaneous round of applause broke out. Leo, for the first time in her life, felt like she was truly home. The grand reopening of Arabella's was, by all metrics, the event of the season. But it was not the event the city's elite had been expecting. The cold, sterile white and chrome of Le Ciel had been ripped out. In its place were warm, polished mahogany, plush velvet booths in shades of forest green and deep burgundy, and soft, intimate lighting from amber-shaded sconces. The air wasn't filled with the tense silence of diners on display. It was filled with the rich, aromatic scents of roasting garlic, thyme, and fresh bread. It buzzed with genuine laughter and the easy, joyful clinking of glasses. Where the glittering stage had once been, a massive yet elegant, hand-carved wooden phoenix now spread its wings, its eye a single, winking ruby, a perfect echo of the pendant Leo now wore openly, proudly, every single day. Leo herself was a far cry from the invisible waitress who once haunted these floors. She was a vision in a simple, perfectly tailored black dress, her hair in a low, confident chignon. She wasn't hiding in the kitchen. She was the soul of the room, moving from table to table, her smile genuine, her presence commanding. The guest list was her own statement. Yes, there were food critics and city investors, but they were seated next to the night shift nurses from the local hospital, invited as guests of honor. The city's most powerful real estate developer was deep in conversation with a community organizer from Leo's old neighborhood. In a quiet corner, a young waiter named Leo, a former Le Ciel employee who Leo had rehired, fumbled with a heavy tray of champagne flutes. His hands shook, the glasses rattling, and a splash of champagne hit the floor. He froze, his face ashen, his eyes darting around in terror, a conditioned response from Marcus Henderson's reign. "Mr. Henderson would have fired me on the spot," he whispered, his body rigid. A hand gently touched his arm. He flinched, then looked up to see Leo. She wasn't angry. She simply picked up a napkin. "It's just champagne, Leo," she said, her voice low and warm. "And we are not Le Ciel. You're doing a wonderful job. Take a deep breath. I'll get someone to clean this. You just focus on the guests in the main alcove. They're loving you." Leo stared at her, his panic visibly melting into stunned gratitude. "Yes, Miss Vance. Thank you, Miss Vance. It's Leo," She corrected him gently. Now go. You've got this. As he hurried off, a renewed confidence in his step, Leo turned and walked toward the best table in the house. It was tucked into a quiet, curved booth. In it sat Damien, his usual hard expression softened into one of deep, undisguised pride. Beside him, in a comfortable, custom-designed chair, sat Arthur Blackwood. The frail, haunted man from the conservatory was gone. His eyes were bright, and he was engaged in an animated conversation, a full-bellied laugh escaping him. And next to him, her eyes wide as saucers, was Leo's sister, Clara. She was wearing a new dress, her college textbooks momentarily forgotten, and she looked at Leo with an expression of pure awe. "Lara," Clara whispered as Leo slid into the booth. Look at this place. It's like a movie." "It's just a restaurant, Clara," Leo smiled, taking her sister's hand. "No, it's not," Arthur Blackwood interjected, his voice surprisingly firm. He placed his gnarled hand over both of theirs. "A restaurant is just a room. You've built a home. My daughter, your mother, Arabella. She was always trying to do that. She'd bring home stray cats, stray friends. She just wanted to make things kind. You have her heart, Leo, but," he said, his eyes twinkling, "you have your grandmother's head for business. A formidable combination." "We're just so proud of you, Leo," Damien said. He raised his glass. "I haven't seen my father laugh like this in 22 years. I have you to thank for that." "My dear," Arthur said, his eyes misting, "you've given me my family back. You've given me my past. And you've given me a future," Leo said, her own voice thick with emotion. She looked at Clara, who was already digging into a decadent chocolate dessert. "You've given us a future." Damien leaned in slightly, his expression turning serious for a moment. "Speaking of the past," he murmured, "I had a final call from the legal team today. I thought you should know." "Eleanor?" Leo asked, her stomach tightening. "Found guilty on all counts," Damien said, his voice flat and final. "The attempted murder of a minor, the conspiracy, the financial crimes, the evidence of the cash withdrawal, and the immediate subsequent transfer to that doctor in South America. It was an ironclad case. Her appeal was denied this morning. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison. The Blackwood name and its influence will not be helping her. And Sebastian? His, Damien said with a grim smile, is almost more poetic. He was caught in Zurich trying to access a hidden account his mother had set up. He's been extradited. He's facing charges from the Blackwood Industries Board for his own myriad of frauds, and from the Swiss government for money laundering. He's finished. Utterly. Leo let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a month. It was over. Truly over. "And Mr. Henderson?" she asked, a final, smaller thread. Damien's smile widened. "I may have, on your behalf, made a few calls to the Restaurant Association. After his public humiliation and the financial ruin of Le Ciel, no one in fine dining will touch him. My assistant heard he was last seen interviewing for an assistant manager position at a 24-hour fast food joint." Leo felt a twist of pity, which was immediately replaced by a cold sense of justice. He made his choice. "He did," Damien agreed. He then slid a heavy, leather-bound folder across the table. "Now, on to your future. The Blackwood Foundation." Leo opened it. The documents were already signed, transferring full signatory control of the multi-billion-dollar charitable fund to her. "The board is eager for your new direction," Damien said. "Clara's tuition was the first check I signed," Leo said, grinning at her sister. "Best check ever," Clara mumbled through a mouthful of chocolate. "But I have a new proposal I'm drafting," Leo said, her eyes turning serious, her proprietor voice returning. "I want to start a new fund within the foundation, the Vance Grant. It will be for service industry workers, emergency medical funds, legal aid for wrongful termination, scholarships for them and their children, for all the people who are one bad boss or one cruel customer from losing everything." Damien and Arthur just stared at her. "What?" Leo said, suddenly self-conscious. "Is that too small?" "Small?" Arthur said, shaking his head. "My dear, that's the biggest idea this family has had in a generation. It's perfect." Later that night, after the last happy guest had departed and the staff was sharing a celebratory drink, Leo stood alone in the center of the dining room. She looked up at the phoenix carving, its ruby eye seeming to glow in the dim light. She unconsciously touched the matching pendant at her throat. She remembered Eleanor's final, venomous words, spat at her as the guards dragged her away. "You may have the name, but you'll always be the waitress. You'll never be one of us." A slow smile spread across Leo's face. She was right, Leo thought, but she was also wrong. She would always be the waitress. She would always be the woman who understood the ache in her feet after a 12-hour shift. She would always be the woman who knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be humiliated for sport by the cruel and the powerful. She would always be the woman who knew the value of a single dollar, earned through sweat and exhaustion. Eleanor had meant it as an insult, but Leo now understood it was her greatest strength. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't an Eleanor or a Beatrice or a Henderson. She was Leo Vance, the waitress who had been forged in fire. And she was Leo Blackwood, the leader who would use that fire to build a better world. She looked at her reflection in the dark windows. She saw the girl from the alley and the woman who owned the building. They were, at last, the same person. The phoenix had risen. The world that had once thrown Leo Vance away now bowed at her feet. But for Leo, it was never about the money or the power. It was about reclaiming a legacy of strength that a cruel world had tried to bury. She proved that your circumstances do not define you, and that the worthless trinket from your past might just be the key to your entire future. From a fired waitress to a celebrated philanthropist, Leo's journey reminds us that true family finds you, and that the most powerful revenge is building a life of kindness and success. What did you think of Leo's incredible transformation? Have you ever felt invisible, only to realize you were powerful all along? Let us know your favorite part of her story in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a story of hope, and be sure to subscribe for more dramas like this one.